Okay, well, welcome to this final workshop for the day. It's Taking Liberties, Surveillance, the State and Islamophobia. I'm going to be chairing this session. I'm Sam, I'm a National Officer of the Stop the War Coalition. As most or all of you know, Stop the War has campaigned tirelessly against Islamophobia, really since we started in 2001. We oppose war, we oppose Islamophobia, and the reason for that, of course, is because we realise, as all of you will, that the war in terror is not only killing hundreds of thousands of innocent Muslims in the Middle East and North Africa, but also the ruling establishment are whipping up Islamophobia at home in order to give ideological cover to those wars, and at the same time using the fear whipped up to justify curtailing civil liberties and human rights and increasing police powers. So both our speakers will be discussing some of those issues. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker. Shazi Azad is an organiser with the Islamophobia Awareness Month, as you can see posted there. She's a committee member with the Enough Coalition Against Islamophobia. She's worked for a number of human rights groups. She's an inspiring campaigner against Islamophobia. Please give a warm welcome to Shazi Azad.
Thank you. So just first of all, a couple of words about Islamophobia Awareness Month. As you can see, the banners there and all our contact details are there, so please have a look and check us out. But basically the month was set up last year and it was this year is our first anniversary. And the month was to bring together all the different groups that campaign on Islamophobia, the various anti-racist, anti-fascist groups, but also groups like Stop the War. And Stop the War is a partner of the month. And the reason why we decided to set up the month was to use and to kind of have the opportunity to run a month-long campaign so that we could really focus on some of the issues and bring some of the issues around Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred to public attention, and use the month to kind of increase the awareness and increase the noticeability of the campaign. A lot of groups work on Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred throughout the year, and it's really important that we do it year round, but the reason for the month was because one thing that we realised is that actually Islamophobia is on the rise and anti-Muslim hatred is on the rise. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we're here a decade later, after the war on terror, or more than a decade in fact, after the war on terror, after the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, that actually in that same time Islamophobia has increased. Islamophobia has almost certainly begun to affect Muslims in the UK various different levels. So it's not just about Islamophobia in politics and in media, but it's now filtered down, and we see Muslims being attacked very physically and verbally on the streets. We see issues of community tension. Reports recently released by, I think it was Birmingham University, showed that the number of Muslim women who are being attacked physically, so not just, kind of having things said to them, but physical attacks, having their hijabs ripped off from them, having things thrown at them, being physically hit, that kind of thing, has been increasing, and it's Muslim women who are now facing the brunt of this. And it's because Islamophobia has now got grounds, it's now got the opportunity to make itself more visible. It's almost been sanctioned by the state in a way, because what we've seen is Islamophobia in politics. So we see the demonisation of Muslims. Muslims have been made to be the other. Muslims are the people we're fighting in a war in another country, so therefore it's okay for us to talk about them in a negative and demeaning way. And it only makes sense, therefore, that people will take that same attitude and then reflect upon that when they are, dealing with people in their area, in their communities. And that negativity and that kind of tension that arises is definitely a consequence of that. And we cannot get away from the fact that Islamophobia in politics is one of the biggest problems. during the Islamophobia Awareness Month, we've had a huge range of events, and one of the events that we had this week was our first anniversary meeting, and we had it in the House of Commons. And it was really interesting for us because whilst it was a really important meeting and it was great and we were really pleased with all the people that did attend, one of the things that we noticed was that there were barely any MPs. We had one MP chairing, we had one MP who said he might drop in, but that was it. MPs are really unwilling to engage with the issue at the moment. It's still not quite on their radar, because for them, Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hatred, is just about the physical attacks. It's not about what causes the Islamophobia, it's not about where the roots of Islamophobia lie. That is very difficult for them to deal with. And we can see that when politicians don't really look at the problem of Islamophobia in the discourse that they use, and the language that they use. That's why things like the niqab ban that's being proposed by Conservative backbench MPs has almost gone, not completely unchallenged, but almost unchallenged in the House of Commons, because MPs don't really understand the issue. As far as they're concerned, the niqab is not something that they really want to waste their time with. It's an alien issue. And yes, there are some MPs that will stand up and make their voices heard and say, no, we don't really agree with this. And it's, it's good that those MPs exist. But the problem is that the fact that we can have a debate about the niqab ban, the fact that a national newspaper thinks it's okay to run a poll about the niqab and thinks that it's okay to talk about Muslims as, this foreign section of society that really aren't part of British society. All these different things, they come from somewhere, and they come from the fact that politics and politicians over the last 10, 13 and possibly longer years have basically said Muslims are the problem here, and it's Muslims that we need to deal with. And it's that kind of language which has basically caused Islamophobia to really be on the increase and be on the rise. So when we're talking about the war on terror, when we're talking about all the foreign wars that we've unfortunately seen taking place, we have to look at what effect they've had, and unfortunately they have had an effect. They've had a very real effect on the people living in the UK, and unfortunately it's the Muslim community that's felt the brunt of it. It's the Muslim community that have not only had to witness unjust and illegal wars, but then they've had to deal with people in their areas deciding that actually they don't like Muslims anymore, or perhaps they never liked Muslims, but now they want to show how much they don't like Muslims. And then it's a bit of a catch-22, because what we see this kind of Islamophobia, and we see it from the top down, but we see it from the grassroots up now, and it's almost like it's of every single section of society, and it doesn't seem to be, unfortunately, stopping. We don't seem to be finding any particular ways to combat it, and that's why the Enough Coalition Against Islamophobia, Islamophobia Awareness Month, and all the other anti-racist, anti-fascist organisations have got such an uphill battle. And it's not just the far right. I think this is another problem that when we talk about Islamophobia, we get a little bit complacent, and we think that, well, it's just the far right that we've got to deal with. It's just the EDL or the BNP. But it's not just the EDL and the BNP. The EDL pose a serious threat, they do, and we can't ignore them, and we can't pretend that they don't exist. Unfortunately, they're real, they're there, they go and they make a nuisance of themselves. But actually, it's more than just the EDL and the BNP, and it's almost now through mainstream society. If we look at Islamophobia in the media, I mean, that's another example. I mean, we could talk for hours upon end about how Islamophobia in the media has basically taken over. We can see, headline after headline where, the word Muslim is preceded by something equally inflammatory, and actually it might be nothing to do with Muslims, the headline or the story, but it's just got a good link and it sells papers. Somebody recently said that the word Muslim sells now. It used to be that, other things could sell newspapers, and newspapers are a dying industry. They need whatever they can find, and at the moment it's Muslims. It's, you know, well, if we've got a negative story, if we've got a story that doesn't work, let's just stick a Muslim into it, and I'm sure it'll sell us a few extra copies. Sadly, it's working for them. So I think that's what we need to talk about now. We need to talk about how we deal with Islamophobia, in not just when we're tackling the far right, not just when we're marching against the EDL, which we have had to do, when we have had to oppose the BNP wherever they might come and present themselves. But actually we need to do more than that. We need to tackle it in politics. We need to say that we're no longer going to accept politicians using language that is inflammatory. We're going to challenge politicians on their use of Muslims as a kind of othering, the othering of Muslims. We're going to challenge them when they talk about banning the niqab. We're going to challenge them when they insult Muslims in the different ways that they do. I think I'm going to draw to a close there, but I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. A round of applause. Okay, well, as you probably gathered, we're short of the speaker. Not to worry, that leaves more time for you guys. Okay.
Bill, we hope he can turn up. Apologies, everybody, for this.
Okay.
What you say is more time for everybody else.
Tansy, did you want to say a few words? Yeah, okay. Well,
Britain is innately a broadly racist society. This is a question.
It is a question. Britain is innately a broadly racist society. People who look and dress differently to the traditional white Anglo-Saxon and or Caucasian extraction are regarded suspiciously. Any reason to demonise and attack such people is justifiable. It would be far more difficult politically for Barack Obama to assassinate by drone or seal a white child in semi-detached suburbia than a brown child in a village hut. It's not a religious thing, because few British are religious and fewer still understand religion. Do you agree?
Man with the striped jumper.
Hello. I am a Muslim, and the problem I think a lot of us have is with the media, in fact, not just the politicians, but the media. They have two things in particular. The first one is that they seem to, when there's a minority group of maybe 20 or 30 people who probably don't agree with you, the majority of Muslims don't agree with their views, they make the national headlines. They're on the news, they're newspapers for 3 days. When you see how many people there were at a protest or arguing about a dead soldier coming back or something like that, there were 30 people there, and yet they've been on the media for 3 days. So it seems to be out of proportion to the 1.5 million people who weren't there. The second thing is that I think they keep putting the word Muslim in to make a negative connotation. For example, there could be a burglary somewhere. There are burglaries everywhere. There will be a burglary in Lancashire, and then they'll put in the word that a Muslim youth burgled a house in Lancashire. And it will make national news in London and everywhere else. And again, you wonder why that happens. Do you think there's... I don't think it's to sell newspapers. I just wonder if there's something else going on, that there's a more centralised reason to denigrate Muslims. I don't know if you agree.
Can we have the man with the glasses and grey hair, and then the man with the kafaya, and then we'll bring Tansy in.
I actually want to come back on the guy who spoke first. Britain is an inherently racist society. I'm not sure I completely agree with that. Don't agree with that at all. Because I think while racism has been a long-standing feature of this society, I don't think anyone here would dispute that. I think it's equally been a long-running tradition of anti-racism and opposition to that. You can go back to the charters about black members, which is one of the first working-class organisations in this country. You can go back to the fact about that, the time the charter being founded, a black man got elected as an MP in South East London. There is a long history of fighting out, of opposing racism and opposing the othering of minority groups. I think we need to recognise the two things exist. The racism that's coming from the politicians, the media, as the speaker was so well described, and also the resistance to that. Because if you just take one, then it's a very pessimistic position. If you just take the other, it's a bit naive. You have to recognise the two situations. And I wanted to just expand a little bit about the role that Islamophobia plays in society. Because obviously it's been linked with the war on terror, and you have to demonise the people who you feel you can then go and drop drones on from 1,000 feet up in the air. It's also that wider question of racism keeping us at each other's throats. I'm not a Muslim, I'm from a Sikh family, but since 9/11, the number of times that it's been assumed I'm a Muslim, and I've experienced that racism because people just think a brown face, you must be a Muslim. I haven't shaved today, so I've got a little bit of a beard, oh, you must be a Muslim. Actually, I've never been a Muslim. I haven't actually got any connection to Islam. So there is a wider role that racism plays in society, which is why we need to look at its existence and the opposition to it.
The gentleman with the kafaya, and then we'll bring Tansy.
Yes, thank you. I'm reminded of what I think John Rees was saying this morning about our inability to self-reflect and understand as white, British and middle-class males in this context. Reading the news recently about a Muslim sect, I believe in the north, that was accused of running some kind of prostitution ring with young girls, and how I found that interesting to contrast that with people like Jimmy Savile and Stuart Hall, who are all white, middle-class males. That was portrayed as some kind of Muslim issue, that it was because they were Muslim that they were running this kind of cartel. But surely, perhaps we've got a middle-class white male issue happening in this country with people like Jimmy Savile, who apparently are now, there are 30 different hospitals being involved in the search for his misdemeanours. But that's the inability of the kind of white, superior, middle-class English male, unable to reflect upon our own issues. The question is, unless we are able to reflect on that kind of superiority complex that we possess, we will never get to the bottom of this issue.
Tansy is a member of Stop the War Coalition. She's a political commentator and writer. She writes a lot about radical fashion, including commentary on the hijab, and she's just written a book called Stitched Up. So please give a warm welcome to Tansy Hospital.
Well, I'm sorry I'm not Shamil, but thank you to Stop the War for inviting me onto the platform at such late notice. The first thing, or the first person I would like to talk about is Jeremy Brown, who is the MP who raised the whole question of the niqab ban in Parliament, and was on the front pages of newspapers and doing the rounds of the TV shows. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jeremy Brown's constituency. It's a place I've spent a lot of time in. It's where my parents live. It's in Somerset, and I don't know what the Muslim population is in Jeremy Brown's constituency around Taunton, but I've never seen a woman wearing a hijab in that area, let alone a woman in a niqab or a burqa. But what Jeremy Brown does have in his constituency is a massive problem with rural unemployment. He has an art budget in Somerset that has been 100% cut. He has buses that are being slashed. He has a massive army base there where young men and women are being sent off to Afghanistan to fight and die. So he has more problems in his constituency than it would take him 10 lifetimes to solve. But what he does instead is spend his time wandering around television studios lecturing women on what they should and shouldn't wear. And yeah, I mean, we have to, I'm completely like 100% opposed to any kind of ban on the hijab, on the niqab, on the burqa. I think it's very clear. I mean, you only have to think about what are we doing when we, you set up a nightclub and you say no caps, no hoodies. What you're doing is saying anyone wearing caps or hoodies is not allowed into this space that I've created. It doesn't mean the people who are wearing the caps and the hoodies are going to, can afford to go and buy fancy shoes and a different kind of hat. All it means is that they're completely excluded from that club. And banning certain items of women's clothing, saying women wearing a headscarf are not allowed into university, doesn't mean that women are going to go and change what they're wearing. It means they're banned from the university. It means you're creating a geography in this country where Muslim women are not welcome in places where they absolutely should be welcome, where we should be thrilled, that women of any religion or are going to university. So I couldn't be more against a ban on the hijab if I tried. But interesting, just to look at where this ban is coming from, and I agree with one of the friends at the back who was saying that it's very much linked with the war on terror, because there is a direct correlation between Islamophobia in this country, which you seem to be focusing on women's clothing, for God's sake, but and the war on terror. And this is absolutely about dehumanising people in Afghanistan, dehumanising people in Iraq, in Pakistan, in Yemen, wherever the hell the United States decides to bomb next. It's directly related. It's about saying we need to save these people, we need to civilise these people, or, like they said in Vietnam, in order to save the village we had to destroy it. So that's what we're up against, and that's why we really must resist any of this, pernicious clothing bans or the attacks in the media, because what's happening here is having a direct effect on what's happening in Afghanistan and Iraq and across the world. Thank you.
Tansy, that was brilliant. Thank you for stepping on short notice, and we really appreciate that. Can you have a show of hands? Chap right at the back, and then you next in the blue shirt, and then in the green jumper.
Just one comment. There's a Sikh gentleman who's from the Sikh community you mentioned about Sikhs having a bad time as well. Last year we went to Auschwitz with a group of 42 young people, including Islamic scholars and Sikh leaders. We went from Newcastle City Councillor. And on the way back, a couple of the Sikh guys were stopped, first in Poland, in the airport, and then when we got to the UK, the second Sikh guy got stopped in Edinburgh Airport. He was strip searched because they thought he was a terrorist. But I just want to ask a quick question. Do you think the Quillen Foundation is helpful in fighting Islamophobia?
And then blue shirt, and then the green jumper. Just, yeah.
I'll try and be brief because I can. I just want to pick up on the media issue because I think they do play a massive part. Every time I don't really read sort of things like the Daily Express, the Sun newspaper. I have occasionally seen the front page, and if you read it really is. Whether it's against Muslims, asylum seekers, refugees, it's really xenophobic, it's really homophobic. It's just, you wouldn't believe, because I couldn't believe, because I don't really normally read this stuff. So when I read it, it really sort of shocks me, and it's no surprise in some respects if, for people who believe what they read, they pick up a newspaper or whatever, because when was the last time you read something positive or heard something positive about the Muslim community in general? It's always negative, so eventually that, people believe that, and it leads, I think it's dangerous because it leads to, obviously we had the terror attacks in Norway as well, which was, it was just a tragedy. 77 people died. A Muslim man in Birmingham, an 82-year-old, was killed, was stabbed by someone who had been in this country 5 days, from the Ukraine. Obviously a big far-right problem, across Europe, but just, in relation to Britain, you'll find this like I said a lot, it's probably the best, in terms of Europe, it's probably the safest and best country in terms of being Muslim, because if you look at France, if you look at Switzerland, Bulgaria, Hungary, political. I mean, people are being elected based on their anti-Muslim stance and will ban mosques. I think the Bulgarian, he designed a picture where it's sort of the point of the Eiffel Tower is actually a mosque or a minaret to show that Muslims are taking over. And especially it's really dangerous if you look at what's happening across Europe. But also, I don't think we always help ourselves because anyone who saw, you mentioned the EDL, if you saw the documentary with Tommy Robinson and what happened in Luton, once the two Muslims got together, they would just have a go at each other. They couldn't agree half the time on what, themselves, and I encountered that myself, amongst Muslims I work with as well. We're not, in many respects, we don't help ourselves as well. And so that was just one other point. And I'm really interested in what you would have to say about the niqab as well, because it does seem to be an issue. I don't think everyone who says ban the niqab is necessarily islamophobic or hates Muslims, but I think there's a real. I'm not sure, but you mentioned MP. I think one of these refused to see a woman. It would refuse to see anyone in a niqab. But it's an interesting debate, and I'd just like to hear what panel would say. Thank you.
The woman with the glasses, yes. Sorry, because we haven't had any women from the floor, but I'll bring the man in the green jumper afterwards.
I just want to add a bit about the media, particularly the liberal media, who I feel have betrayed many people in this country, because you kind of expect the right to do what they do and say what they say. Channel 4 News, for example, chose to air a debate about whether women should wear the niqab, which I thought was absolutely outrageous, and I wrote to them about that. I've had no reply beyond the one that says Channel 4 likes to air unusual views. Also, David Blunkett, in scattering his comments about the Roma people, I think what we have to be aware of is that there's a slow creep of racism making its horrible way through the far right through our communities and our society. During the 70s and 80s, I was the butt of anti-Irish behaviour on the part of the state, so I have that in my lived experience, and I can hear the same rhetoric coming, and I find it very worrying. And I guess I'm saying that we need to be watching out for that. In Whitechapel, 286 people were arrested, including 5 of my fellow legal observers, which has never happened before. But what we found out through a Freedom of Information request is actually that the Met had asked Transport for London 5 days before for a fleet of double-decker buses to take all the arrested people to police stations, so they planned this. My point is that the police, there is a right-wing, racist, nasty element creeping right through the power structures of our society, and that's what we need to be watching.
I just wanted to pick up on this question of racism, whether Britain is a racist society. About 20 years ago, I was thought Britain was making real progress in anti-racism and becoming less racist. And actually, this is borne out in surveys like British Social Attitude, which found until 2002, racism in British society was on the decline. Since then, racism in British society, according to British Social Attitude survey, has actually on the increase. Now, the obvious answer to that in this room would be to say, well, this is down to the war on terror. And I've got no doubt that the war on terror has a major role to play in that. But I think what we also need to recognise is that there's also been a major anti-immigrant and anti-asylum seeker discourse that we've heard throughout this past decade or so. And I think that also has to be a part of the reason why racism was on the rise in British society as well. And so I think that's something we have to challenge just as much as Islamophobia itself. On the question of the media, I think the media really, particularly it is the liberal media, it's intellectual magazines like Prospect magazine and The Economist, but are also very much have a real sort of Islamophobic discourse behind them as well. That's just another point I wanted to add in.
Woman at the front, and then woman at the back, and then you at the front.
Hi, Some of the support for a ban on the niqab has been coming from people who define themselves as feminists and claim to be liberating Muslim women. My question is, do you think that white British feminism contributes to Islamophobia?
Which one?
The glasses, yes. Nadia.
Hello, everyone. I've heard the different views, and of course I agree that there's a media role and there's the 9/11 and war on terror, but I would particularly like to say and expand on the concept of power structures that this lady was talking about, having actually a very, very decisive role. Whether we get justice or not, we should not forget the justice system. I mean, I've been to a number of cases where it doesn't matter in our ordinary lives what the case is. A court system is supposed to basically hear our evidence, and it's become so corrupted and so discriminatory and so vulgar and basic in their behaviour and treatment. I mean, it's all evident in my cases, but one can't help feeling and wondering whether that is related to my identity. And I mean, there's of course non-Muslims who are also complaining about the same thing, but I do feel strongly that there is also an Islamophobic element within the justice system, and the justice system has been moving more and more and more towards a discretionary system, and basically a discretionary system is just giving itself an entitlement, the judges or the politicians who are behind it, to basically discriminate. So whether we're suffering fraud or employment, or we're suffering libel, and we come to the court to look at the court system routinely. If you look at all my cases, the one thing they're doing repeatedly right through all my cases is avoiding the evidence. They look for any excuse to avoid the evidence. It's a very simple behaviour, very noticeable behaviour, and it's something that we should all become aware that we're supposed to, instead of, as you say, Muslims, when the comment has been made that we're not helping ourselves, but the way to help ourselves is the justice system, to go to it, to follow proper procedures, the legal procedures, and it's that place where if we're to expect justice in a proper way, the proper legitimate way, the justice system has to be reformed. The justice system has to start being looked at, and the repeat discriminations within it. There have been efforts by many Muslims, of course, that there have been conferences and things where certain Muslim leaders have tried to address this and have tried to bring it to the focus. I mean, I do have a newspaper clipping of one, and I attended one, but basically the leaders, the chief judges, were doing pretty much what they keep doing to our cases anyway. They were avoiding the subject and they start focusing on something else. Basically, you see that behaviour very evident in whatever complaint system you go through, whatever complaints you make. As soon as an assessor and a judge starts avoiding and diverting from it, you know you've got a point. You know, it means you have a valid case, you have the evidence, they just don't want to know about it. It's a very obvious discrimination, it's a very obvious behaviour, and we should become aware and start fighting things like that. So Islamophobia, yes, there are the general behaviours, things people are suffering, but we should have been able to go to the justice system and get our recourse from there. And therefore you've got to also look at the justice system as a whole, why it's not dealing with such cases and complaints, and why we're not getting our problems addressed. And they're built in all sorts of tricks within the law to avoid dealing with the evidence and your complaints. So I just wanted to mention that, and whether anything can be done, progress towards that as well.
Just before we bring on you, can you just have a show of hands who still wants to speak? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About 5 people. We're going to have to keep it very brief because we've got 10 minutes and I want to bring speakers in to sum up. So if you can keep it really brief. So don't take offence if I kind of rush you after.
Very briefly, I just wanted to follow on from what the last 3 speakers said. I just think it's part of a wider context in politics of feel, what the politicians are trying to use to kind of deflect blame from what they're doing, especially since like the 2008 crisis and the austerity measures, what they're putting through at the moment. to cut welfare, the blaming the unemployed, the disabled, also immigration as well, and just really trying to divide people, to deflect blame from the wider power structures, like the lady was saying.
This chap,
I'll keep it brief. In 1985, I heard a record by the Specials called If You Have a Racist Friend. That was my first introduction to my own racism. I had a real close look at myself and at my associates. And what I would urge everyone to do is today, the rhetoric, particularly UKIP, I have to say, dangerous party. In our families and friends, you know, I come across people with an underlying Islamophobic attitude. Challenge it. That's what we must all do. Just challenge it. Do not be afraid. And I'll leave it there. Thanks.
And then Sky.
Personally speaking, I understand that it's the immigration matter and the war on terror that's affecting it, but I also think that the number of conversions into Islam also plays an important role. I mean, a lot of people are converting into Islam, and my own personal opinion, I don't know if you guys agree to it as well, is to add a fear in people who may want to convert into Islam as well, just build a fear amongst those people so much that they don't even think about converting into Islam. I just personally.
On the niqab, I belong to an organisation called HUGS, which looks after, does its best to look after the families of a group of men who are imprisoned without trial, without any knowledge of what they'd done as terrorists. And this was possible because they were not British citizens. They had the option of going back to their countries where they would have been tortured. These men were in prison for a good few years until finally the European Union said that this was against their human rights. And while I was driving the family of one particular gentleman to prison, I used to sit and wait with a group of other drivers while the families were united. And I would talk to the other drivers, who were very often a young woman with her father, who would be the driver, and the young women were all wearing the niqab, and they all told me that they had taken wearing the niqab as a political statement in solidarity with this, against this very, very cruel injustice which did a lot of harm to Britain in the eyes of the Muslim community. And I would just like to say on the feminism issue that we should all support women wearing the niqab as a political gesture.
Yes, and then who else? Someone had okay, and then these two gentlemen. Yeah. You have about sort of 1 minute.
Yeah. There have been a lot of important suggestions about trying to influence power structures. Can you say whether there have been any attempts to approach local, local white organisations around the country with offers to actually speak about what Islam is and what being a Muslim is? Because I just wonder if people were better educated in much of white England, this would be a helpful addition to what people try to do with the power structures.
This society is called Western Liberal, Capitalist, Turbocharged, Military-Industrial Complex. It's extremely diverse, multiracial, etc. So I'm just wondering how that copes with Islam and the fact that a lot of activities go on that people don't perhaps understand enough about. So I'm wondering if the panels, if one of the speakers could say what can be done to kind of, meld some of that kind of schism which is happening, because I can hear an awful lot of fear and persecution here, and it's fear and ignorance really is what is driving this, and it always has done, against other members of society, the Jews in the past, for example, and many other minority groups. So I'm just looking for kind of some positive comments about how that can be melted a bit, that faction. Thanks.
yeah, again, really building on what the man at the front and this guy's just said, that Shazi, you've talked getting to the root of Islamophobia. The guy over there was talking about ingrained racism in British culture. This man over here is talking about challenging racist views when we hear it said passively amongst friends and family. And I think, yes, this is incredibly important, that we actually need to bring this debate we're all having and bring this into schools, make it part of curriculum. From a young age, children need to be aware of these issues. They're extremely complicated. We can't form a consensus about how we're possibly ever going to if children aren't aware of this and discussing it and understanding it from them.
Okay, is there anyone else who wants to speak?
Yeah, I just want to say I've got raised a Catholic myself, which comes with a fair amount of guilt and thrown in, always does in rural Ireland. But I've got great respect for all religions, for all cultures, for all practices that people have. But I can't help thinking that religion itself sort of keeps people divided in a way, which I don't think is the idea of having a sort of unified world. And I would suggest that people take it upon themselves to maybe visit an interfaith church, to educate themselves about what other people believe, so they can actually understand other people and have love for other people. We're all the same at the end of the day, but if we're going to use different things to divide people, and governments are going to hide behind, different religions and races as an excuse to perpetrate war, I think we have to take upon ourselves this responsibility. We need to understand who we're living with. Otherwise, the world, is going to sort of destroy itself, which it's already doing. That's all I say.
Okay, well, I think that was a really excellent discussion, so thank you to everyone who joined in. Nadia wants to say something.
Sorry, just really quickly. One tangible way in which we can combat Islamophobia is, for example, on campus, we actually sort of campaigning against a neoconservative organisation that's meddling in anti-war, Palestinian activism, and also targeting Islamic societies. And the organisation that's actually targeting these societies is called Student Rights, ironically. It's an offshoot of Henry Jackson Society, and we've got a petition going on at the moment. It's called Real Student Rights. It's on change.org. And also we're passing motions in universities saying, hold on a minute, this neoconservative organisation is meddling on student activism, and they're not a student body at all, comprising largely of people who obviously oppose far left, and also just they have an issue with some Muslim speakers. So that's something tangible that you can do.
Okay, we'll bring our speakers to sum up, 5 minutes each, starting with Tansy.
Okay. Well, I think the discussion about unity and how do you bring people together is an important one. I think this room is a pretty good example of how to bring people together, and I think that is one of the reasons I'm most proud to have been part of the Stop the War Coalition since its beginning, because right from the beginning, a central part of Stop the War was resisting Islamophobia, and I think the bringing together of all the different sections of the anti-war movement, so the traditional left and the trade unions and the churches and all the different parts of the Muslim community, and many other sections of society, bringing them all all of us together in one room and on on hundreds of demonstrations, I think is a really important part of the anti-war movement in this country. And I think it's probably one of the main reasons why we've avoided some of the pitfalls of some of the left and the feminist left in countries like France, where you had French feminists lining up to support the ban on the hijab, and it was a catastrophic mistake. I mean, their sort of starting premise was that Muslim women are repressed, therefore we have to save them. And their method for saving them was by putting them in in a huge legislative cage, which meant they couldn't function in their daily lives. So actually, the French feminists really screwed up, in my opinion. And so yes, I think you have to. They should be held accountable for what for what they've helped to make possible. But it's something that has not happened in this country. You don't have feminists and sections of the left in this country lining up to support a ban on the hijab. On the niqab ban, it was Jack Straw who said that he wouldn't see a woman in need who's come to him just because she was wearing a particular style of clothing. And one of the narratives obviously I'm not a Muslim woman, I don't wear the hijab or the niqab, but I've spoken to quite a few women who do wear the niqab. And actually, there's an interesting thing happening is a lot of them, far from their fathers or husbands or whatever telling them to wear it, a lot of the husbands and fathers and things and their friends are actually saying, please don't wear it. We're worried about you. To wear the niqab in Britain today is to court hostility, is to risk attack. So actually, a lot of people are saying, we're concerned for your safety. Please be careful. And I think that's something that's not talked about. And I think it also shows that far from sort of passive stereotypes, Muslim women wearing the hijab and the niqab, I would say, are extremely brave and are actually, to be sort of seen as something to be admired in this society and not feared. Because if you're brave enough to make such a statement with your dress every day on the streets, I think it's a brilliant thing. I think it's something to be proud of. And Stop the War has always, taken the position. We've been on the demonstrations outside the French embassy when the ban was being pushed through there. And our slogan has always been, and it remains today, it's a woman's right to choose. It's a woman's right to choose what clothing she does or does not put on her body. And that's the correct position that we continue to hold. Thank you.
Okay, Shazi, wrap up.
There were loads of really interesting points there, but I think Tanzi's last point about it being a woman's right to choose, which is probably one of the most important ones. Somebody in the audience went through a description of what Britain is, and the word liberal was mentioned. And it's not very liberal to tell people what to wear. In my day job, I have to go to the party conferences every year, and this year I went to the Liberal Democrat Party conference, and I thought, well, it's the Liberal Democrat Party conference, so it's going to be quite liberal. And every conversation and every meeting about Muslims or about foreign policy or about the Middle East came back down to whether women should or shouldn't wear the niqab or the hijab. Doesn't strike me as the sort of thing we should be doing. It's telling people how to dress. It seems a little bit autocratic to me. But anyway, there were loads of other really interesting points raised. I think the thing about the media is really important. Actually, there is a real problem in the media. Maybe it's not just to sell newspapers. Maybe there is a stronger agenda there. But I think that part of the problem is that there are lots of different factors, and Islamophobia is something that has kind of crept into so many different parts of society that almost now it's hard sometimes to draw the distinction as to why it is somewhere. Is it because of someone's inherent belief? Is it because of the othering? Is it because someone just is ignorant? And all these different factors are definitely part of the problem. The issues about austerity, and yeah, we do see that. We see that all the time. When the country is going through a difficult time, it's very easy to turn to the others and to turn to the people who we can quite easily victimise. And unfortunately, it's the Muslims, but it's also the Romas. We've seen that. We've seen an increasing anti-Eastern European discourse starting to develop. So those things are definitely part of the problem. Is Britain inherently racist? I don't think so, and I really hope not. I think there's a problem with Islamophobia, but I think overall we tend to get on quite well, and I think, like Tansy said, you know, being here today is an example of that. Is the Quillian Foundation helping to combat Islamophobia? No, I think it's helping to create Islamophobia. I was involved in helping to launch a report a couple of years ago which looked at the Cold War of British Muslims, and it looked at the different organisations behind the scenes, the think tanks and the research organisations which are peddling out Islamophobic myth after Islamophobic myth, and which are unfortunately really connected, really well connected into high networks of government and media elites. And they involve some of the people involved in the Henry Jackson Society and student rights, and I know how frustrating it must be to be on campus now with groups like student rights. There were loads of other questions, and I probably haven't been able to cover everything, but I think one of the really important things for me today is that we do tackle Islamophobia, and I think that coming together to talk about it is one of the steps forward, and then we can begin to say, okay, what steps do we need to take, and where do we challenge it in the media, in politics, in our communities where we see it. Thank you.
Okay, well that's it. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you very much to you. Our next session is in 15 minutes. It's upstairs. Final plenary meeting adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you for staying. That was a bit nervous.